Recently, you released your report, Emerging Venture Market Report, and what are the main highlights from it? Some things caught my eyes. One of them is fintech, again, so big. Africa is so big, and the record funding.
So thank you very much. Yeah, our Emerging Venture Market Report covers all of the venture capital investments across Africa, the Middle East, Pakistan and Turkey. And if you look at H1 at the surface, it was a record amount of capital that was deployed across many investment deals. But the reality is it's a half of 2 quarters. Q1 was very much driven by the investment activity that you saw in 2021, which was a record year. But Q2 began to see the impact of the economic slowdown that you're seeing globally into the markets here in the region. Specifically, a 60% drop in investments and a 20% drop in deal flow. But other interesting signs that fintech, as you correctly pointed out, was number one, both by number of transactions and total capital that was being deployed. And one thing that's very interesting for me is exits. The exit activity here in the region is really accelerating, and that provides ROI for founders and investors. Almost 70% of last year's total of 90 exits has already been reached in the 6 months of this year.
Now, since our audience is in Turkey and they are curious about Turkish startup ecosystem, I saw also the numbers are very good in Turkey, but then I realized that they are mega deals. So if you take this out, maybe it's not so good increase?
So I think if you have to go back 2-3 years, Turkey has continued to see a steady growth in capital activity as well as, more importantly, deal flow activity. So a lot more interest in transactions in startups. But you're 100% correct. If you strip out mega deals, which is investments that are larger than $100 million, in fact, 80% of 1.7 billion, which was invested in Turkish startups, comes from those mega deals. Getir, Insider, all of those type of companies. And in reality, the last 3 quarters has seen progressive drop in total amount of funding, whereas the total number of transactions has continued to grow. So very interesting dynamics that are happening in Turkey versus other markets.
In the beginning of the year, everything was shining, good, but now Fed is increasing the rates and everybody talks about recession. How do you think this will affect the startup ecosystem, both funding and also the VC side?
So I always look at the macro picture and I try to learn what's happening from the US and in other markets. I think in more mature markets, there was a very quick adaptation towards profitability, positive EBITDA, companies needing to prolong their runway so that they can survive a potential economic crisis that's unfolding. The public markets have already been hit, and naturally that translates into the private markets. What's interesting here, I already alluded to the fact that there's been a drop in capital deployment in Q2 and a drop in the number of transactions.